Over the last week or so, once I've finished this engine component, I've been having a real good look at some photographs of alphas, the inner workings, and also having a good hard look at the components that I've got, and also the plans. And there are quite a few observations that come out of those, and these are the areas which I'm going to apply some attention in order to make the car more realistic when compared to an original model. So there's a couple of things on the engine that I've noticed looking at pictures. One is here and here there are copper, what I think are oil pipes on most of the cars that I can see the engine on. So one of the things to do as I go forward is to amend this engine module so that I can put those copper pipes in. The other thing is the distributor goes up on the top here, and on all the cars that I've seen here there is some bracket work which actually is a crank for the advanced retard on the engine. So this engine doesn't come with any components to do with advanced retard other than a retard lever on the steering wheel. So that's something else that I will make in an endeavour to make the model look much more realistic than it does. So that's what I found on the engine to date. As I find any more items on the engine, then I'll be doing more updates. Looking at the bodywork, and this is the rear of the car. This goes together like that. It's held together with screws. But one of the things that you notice on the real car, and it was kind of moulded into, you might just be able to see a slight line there. So there were some fixings with a line between them that were supposed to represent the fixings on the real car. They weren't very good, so I planed them all away. And in essence, there are 3 fixings along here, 3 across the top and 3 on the other side, which actually hold that component. The screws into this component on the real car, and all of those screws are actually wired with locking wire, so that they don't come undone as the car races around the racetrack. And it's my intention to actually replicate those screws and the locking wire as an add-on feature to give the car more realism. So that's the second thing that I've done. I'm planning to do. You'll recall from an earlier video that I cut the seat out, and I'm planning to remake this entire component so that it will be a padded leather seat. For this I'll probably use cactus leather, which is it's easier to work with because it comes in a uniform thickness. I mean, I have used thin leather, bookbinding leather mainly, which unfortunately you can't get in black, so I might do the seat a different colour anyway. And that's generally around about 0.7 millimeters thick. The cactus leather, which you can get in black and a whole lot of other colours, is a very uniform thickness, and it also has like a woven sheet that it's moulded onto, so it's quite a robust material. But I will be making this component. This is a page from the build manual that you get with the kit, and whilst the kit is very good, particularly when you consider the age of it and what was going on around, I mean, tend to be a bit of a perfectionist, and a lot of the things that they've done in the kit I would do differently, to put it bluntly. But then that's because I've got a machine shop and I can make, and have a lot of experience in making small components and parts. One of the things with this particular kit is that lots of the parts are basically very two-dimensional. So you can see here this component, which is a brake lever, I think, a foot pedal lever, was made out of, it's punched out of a sheet of steel. And then you have to, one of the things I did was you put a twist in the end. So I put a twist in the end of this, which gives it, I guess, a little bit of three-dimensional attribute, but not a lot. I took the view that it doesn't really matter with this component because you never see it. It's buried away behind the foot pedals in the cockpit of the car. But there are lots of other areas. So for example, if you look at this bracket here, so you can see this bracket, which is effectively the hub, one of the front hubs of the car. So this here, for example, let me just point this out. So that's the kingpin, and this component goes with it. And the thing you notice about it is, it was obviously punched out of a sheet of flat steel, and then it was bent. And of course, in the real world, this would have been a casting, and that casting would have had much more thickness, a much greater volume of metal, and would have been a very, very different beast. And what I intend to do is I'm going to make this component, and a lot of these very thin two-dimensional components I'm going to remake to give them some depth and volume, and to look more like they would have looked on the original car. There are a few other, they're not issues, but you know, they're points of accuracy that I will address. So for example, here you can see there's a little crank there. That little crank, the material is probably, at best, 1 millimetre thick, but that little component there, which goes around that crank, has about a 4 millimetre gap inside it. So this is going to, if you imagine it's like this, and this is going to flap up and down. So I'm going to remake a lot of this componentry. I may use those, and then I'll just make this thicker so it looks more realistic, you know. And you can see on the front there's one there, there's another one there. Then of course there's the issues of slotted screws, which of course would never have been used in the applications. Very convenient for the amateur builder, but I will be replacing most of the slotted screws with imperial nuts and bolts, so that it looks much more realistic than it does here. And the other thing that you notice is that a lot of these rods and levers and bars are all chromium plated, and of course, you know, you rarely see chromium plated material on an old car, apart from where the component may be very visible on the bodywork. So the reality is that in most cars, these would have either been painted black, which is very common, or alternatively, they would have been painted the bodywork colour of the car. And that's what I intend to do. So where I can, I'll reuse these. If not, I'll replace them with a brass rod of a similar dimension. And then I will paint them the same colour as the bodywork, which is what I've done with this. I mean, this foot pedal was originally a nice chromium plated piece, but I've given it a coating of etched primer, and then I've painted it the body colour of the car, which is a slight crimson red that I've enamel paint that I'm intending to use. So there's some of the issues around the kit. Oh, there is one other issue that I'll talk about. When I got the kit a couple of years ago, and I was looking through it, one of the things that I discovered was this broken spring. I'll get the other one. So as you can see on the spring, there's a thinness there, which is to accommodate the spring hangers, clamps. So this one is fine, no problems. This particular one though was broken. So at the time as I discovered this, I was building some springs for the Dion Bouton truck. So I took the time as well to also make the components to build the spring for this. And let me just get that. So there's the original spring, and let me just lay those down. And there's my replacement. Now, as you can see, there's no bend on this, so it has to be bent a little bit, and I'll be doing that later. The other issue is there are these clamps that go around the spring, which are to hold it together, and I will be replicating those. And there are these cuts to accommodate the spring clamps. So I've actually made 4 of these springs. The reason it's got this bit of tape around is because they're all just loose pieces. So again, one of the things that I've done already is to start prepping for a replacement set of brass springs. And springs are margin. This is going to fall apart, so I'm just going to pull it apart. It's going to be just a fraction thicker than the original spring, but nothing that will be noticed on the fully assembled model. So one of the problems with old materials, you know, particularly plastics, is they can deteriorate. And as I mentioned earlier, the rubber for the cooling pipes was just solid, so I threw that away, and I'm looking for alternatives for the rubber piping in some of the areas of the car.